will fuck you up. I can tell you one time, go grab your guns. I'll tell you one time, this day belongs to us. Why?
Hello. Good evening. And welcome to The War Room, Israeli Special, Episode 3. An episode I really didn't think we'd be doing at this point, to be perfectly honest. I thought this was really going to be a one and done. I thought that the UN and NATO and the whole world would get involved and everybody would say, fucking stop it. But you know what? Egg on my face. I hate to admit this, but I was pleasantly surprised. Our president, Joseph R. Biden, had said something in a press conference that I sat there and nodded and go, I agree. He said, Israel should not exercise any restraint after what has been done to them. And I thought, wow, he finally said something I can get behind. I'm not Jewish. I'm not even religious. But I saw that and I thought, I heard him say that and I thought, you know what? Yeah, he's right. You don't get to poke the bear and not expect to get your head swatted off afterwards. And this is exactly what's happening right now. If you are Hamas in Gaza and you are getting bombarded by artillery and small arms fire and grenades and missiles and the Iron Dome, the only thing I have to say for you is that's what you get. Anyway, before I start with the introductions, I'm going to go ahead and pull in one Mikhail Naitsraisky. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm also going to pull in one, oh, he took off.
He went off.
Yeah, I was going to pull him in too,
Lightning.
just so he could be part of it. But I know he's a bit gun shy with it, so I guess maybe next time we'll catch it.
Nah.
So there's a couple of things that I had talked about with Mike before we went on air. And what I had decided to do is I'm going to do this episode, but keep in mind, today was also day 600 of what's going on in Ukraine. And we have not forgotten what's going on over there. But one thing that you need to keep in mind is that the Russian winter, the Ukrainian winter, the Eastern European winter, however you want to label it, it's starting to set in that region. And this is the part where the world sort of falls into hibernation and the region sort of settles down and everyone hunkers down and waits for the warm-up.
It can be surmised to this, guys. Listen, there's a reason why both Napoleon and the Nazis had problems invading Russia during the winter, okay? And the problem is Russia's trying to invade the eastern part of what used to be Russia. It's now Ukraine. And yeah, Russia's finding out you don't invade the east,
You don't mess
the
with the
west.
Urals or anything in that region.
You don't do anything during the winter period there.
But either way, the more alarming part is even though everything's sort of hibernating there, it's also stewing at the same time because this is also where they build up their
Well,
future plans for what's going to happen this spring. And we will get to that and we will
yeah.
cover it. I haven't picked a day yet to do so because I'm sort of reserving. If you haven't noticed, episode 1, 2, and 3 was Monday, Friday, Monday. So if hostilities continue to persist in this region of Israel, chances are there will be an episode 4 on Friday. I'm willing to commit to that as long as you are all willing to hear me out and listen and watch and stuff like that. One thing of this episode that I will like to point out, if you saw it in the description, one Tony York, who was a co-host of the Early Watch and the New Watch podcast, he specifically requested an explanation on how the Israeli Iron Dome system works. We will cover that at the end of the show today. I found a very good write-up on it, simple diagram. We'll cover that in case anyone else wants to know, because it is a fascinating system. It's really not that much different than radar, satellite, and Patriot missiles, but it's Israeli, and we'll cover it. There's a new system also called the Iron Rod, and that is a laser system. If this is popular, we'll cover the Iron Rod system next episode if we have one. Hopefully we don't. Like, maybe this will resolve itself, but who are we kidding? Right? Like, if you have been living under a rock, or you haven't had internet, or you're just a dim light bulb in a world of brighter ones, this is World War III, whether the world wants to admit it or not. Like, let's not kid ourselves, okay?
Well, not yet. It's
No.
not World War III yet.
No, it absolutely is.
Well, no, China's not invading Taiwan yet.
That's just the next stage of a play that's already in motion. Realistically speaking. But you might be right. I'm
still
open-minded.
I'm still waiting for, and it won't be World War III until Belarus and Russia send a stray rocket into Poland, and Poland invokes Article 5.
No, because think about this. If China invades Taiwan, and they push all their forces east towards Taiwan, right? They've left nothing behind to defend themselves. Who's to say India doesn't go into China from the west side?
Well, even though they seem to be on okay terms with them, who's to say Mongolia doesn't want its empire back?
I don't know. Anyway, let me go ahead and get started. If you're watching live, thank you. Woods, Tony York, Scherer, all of you guys, thank you. If you catch us on the replay, that's cool too. I'm just going to let you know now, Pwnery has skipped dinner, which means he's going to be grumpy by the end of this episode.
He's on the liquid diet.
We have 41 stories for you.
If you can paraphrase some of them,
they're all short. They're all short. But let me put it to you this way.
You said that last week.
Episode 1 was less than 30. Episode 2 was mid-30s. And I really didn't think I would have this much content to give you guys. Just to get you caught up between Friday to today. Okay? 3 days. 41 stories. 41! One of them is special requested, which I'm glad to do, and it's the longest one. It's the last part of the show. So, Tony, you better stay up late, because by the time we get to that, it'll be midnight, your time.
Or just watch the replay.
Or watch the replay tomorrow. Also, I talked to Jimmy, and I know, like, I love the intro that I use for this show. I love, like, metal, and I love grunge, and I love shouting and screaming, and I love the chaos in it. But I asked him I specially requested something different. And I'm hopefully the War Room will have a new intro coming that's reminiscent of R.A. the Rugged Man kind of hip hop sort of thing. I want to do something slightly different, just for fun. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started because we got a lot of shit to cover. I'm not going to have any filter because I am powered, like Mike said, liquid diet tonight because I haven't had any liquid diet since Friday, and I'm going to indulge, and I'm just in a foul mood because of all what's going on. So we're all going to get through this together. Tonight's drink of choice is Karbach Brewing Rodeo Clown Imperial Tropical IPA. These are 9% IPAs. I've had several.
So it's not a nice box of Card Bordeaux?
Mm-mm.
All right.
I couldn't get Oktoberfest because apparently I bought every can of Oktoberfest in my area, and they're all gone. They're out. So I had to go to a 9% IPA tonight, which is why I'm extra sauced.
Why didn't you just drive to another area?
30-mile circle, Mike. Anyway, tonight in the War Room, the Israeli Special, Episode 3, U.S. President Biden begins to understand the scope of actually what's going on in the Middle East and decides to cancel all of his trips to remain accessible for national security meetings. I am in agreement with this. I think that's a good idea. Lebanese military takes the fight to Hezbollah within their own country. Iran threatens to join the war in ways the world has never seen before, according to them. If they weren't already intimately involved.
Already.
So the question has to be asked, do they have a nuke? Is this threat their nuclear debut that they're about to alluding to, right? Now, if you know anything about Victorian-era British society, they had this thing called a debut, right? This is where British society would have young girls from age 13 to 15, and they would bring them out to these extravagant parties, the debut. This is my daughter. See how prim and proper she is. And they would invite all the suitors of rich families and aristocrats to come. They basically hoard their daughters off. Let's not kid ourselves, right? And I suspect all these threats that Iran is doing right now alludes to the fact that maybe they're about to prove to the world. Well, let me just read it out to you. Wouldn't this nuclear debut by Iran, wouldn't that make years of failed nuclear deals make the West look like absolute fools? Because we keep going back to these stupid nuclear deals with Iran. Nuclear or nuclear? Your choice.
Nuclear.
Do we look like idiots as the West if they actually have a nuclear device? Does our geopolitical position become compromised by the fact that we kept making these stupid deals when they kept playing shell games with these facilities to throw off the, quote, inspectors into thinking that there was no nuclear weapons research going on? I mean, come on. Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder can see this, and one of those guys is dead. Just saying. Also, we answer the question, thanks to Tony York, how does the Iron Dome work? So, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Let's start with the fast facts of the episode, okay? If you weren't aware, or you've been living in a tunnel or a cave, or you've been kidnapped like 200 people in Israel, Israel has declared war against Hamas after the terrorist group infiltrated the country on Saturday, last Saturday, not 2 Saturdays ago, firing thousands of rockets to the tune of 6,500 dumbfire rockets at residential areas and butchering civilians. At least 4,200 people have been killed in this war on both sides, including at least 1,400 Israeli civilians and soldiers, and 30 Americans, 30 of our citizens died there. In our response, we'll get to that. Palestinian health authorities say that at least 2,808, very specific number, Palestinians have been killed and more than 10,950 wounded. 13 American citizens are still unaccounted for, presumed either killed or being held hostage. The number of people held hostage in Gaza right now has surpassed 200. And because of that, there's one addendum to the stories tonight that I have to make. The Israeli push into Gaza on the full scale has been delayed. But I'm going to run over that with the stories. But just so you know, the offensive into Gaza has been delayed for a couple of days. So, let's see. What other factors we have? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to defeat Hamas and, quote, wipe them off the face of the earth in a speech during the swearing in of the National Emergency Unity Government in the Knesset. I say Knesset. I don't know if it's Knesset. I think the K is not silent. So we're just going to go with Knesset. If I don't get it right, please leave a comment because I'd like to get it right. The original attacks were carried out on October 7th, which coincided with the end of the Jewish holiday Simchat Torah. That is a holiday where Jewish people get together, they read the Torah, cover to cover. That must be a long day. And then once they're finished, they say, great, let's start it over again. It's like singing your favorite song as a round and then going back to the beginning. But it's symbolic, so whatever. According to Israeli reports, at least 1,500 Hamas terrorists have been killed in Israel. They estimate that hundreds of terrorists are among the dead in Gaza as well.
Oh, boy.
Yes. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with the stories because, like I said, we have 40 for you. But I promise I will try to get you through these as quickly as possible because these episodes are getting longer because this war is getting longer. First story comes out of Portland, Oregon. Surprisingly enough.
Sean, you realize we're supposed to be covering Israel, not America.
I understand, but I'm trying to show you the global scale of what's going on. Several hundred pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched the streets of downtown Portland, starting and ending at City Hall as war in Israel continues following the attack on the country by Hamas terrorists. Speakers slammed local politicians, including U.S. Senators Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, and Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, for expressing support for Israel. No counter-protesters were seen at the demonstration. Police walked on the sidewalk alongside the demonstrators, but did not appear to interact with them, despite being heckled. No vandalism or aggression was observed, except towards security guards and one streamer at the very end of the event. So, we have a friend who lives in Oregon, and he gives us insight to what goes on in the cities. And after reading this story, I have to say, good on you, Portland, for not turning this into an absolute shit show. You exercised your right to your First Amendment and your right to assembly and speech. You may not be on the right side of this argument in the eyes of the world, but at least you did it without burning a building down or attacking somebody or getting arrested. So, in that regard, good job, Portland. You did it. Hopefully, the rest of the world will follow suit. Moving on, because we have a lot of shit to get through. A group of 19 Republican governors sent a letter to President Biden regarding the ongoing war in Israel, saying his initial response to Hamas terrorist attack was inadequate and his administration should take steps to, quote, project American strength. We pledge our steadfast support to our ally Israel following the appalling attacks perpetrated against Israel's sovereignty and innocent civilians on October 7th, 2023, the governors wrote. We write today to make clear that our states absolutely condemn these heinous acts of terrorism led by Iran-backed Hamas and proudly stand with Israel and its Jewish people. Your administration's initial response, including a call for a ceasefire, created dangerous confusion that has only further emboldened state sponsors of terror and their henchmen to continue attacking Israel, the letter continues. Unfortunately, this type of international chaos and violence is a direct result of your administration's appeasement-first foreign policy. Now is the moment to radically change course. The letter added, we call on you to project American strength by, among other things, clearly and unequivocally condemning these attacks and supporting Israel's unquestioned right to respond and defend itself. When the lives of American citizens hang in the balance, the American president must speak boldly and act decisively. The governor's list of requests includes prioritizing the protection of Americans who remain in harm's way in Israel, providing unequivocal support to Israel as it defends itself from Hamas attacks, easing Biden's appeasement and empowerment of Iran, including freezing the $6 billion payment made to the country in a prisoner exchange, and closing the U.S.-Mexico border to protect Americans from similar threats at home. I have a cat in my throat. More than 2,800 people have been killed in the war since Hamas launched its largest attack on Israel in decades last week, leading to retaliatory action in Israeli forces. Thousands more have been wounded, and many others have been taken hostage by Hamas and raped, tortured, and murdered. So, there's 19 Republican governors, 19 states that penned this letter, signed it, and they said, we need to do more. To be fair, we mobilized the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, who was sent early to the Med and sent east to the western coast of Israel and Gaza. They are on site, on station. Last Tuesday, the USS Eisenhower Strike Group was also instructed to leave Norfolk, Virginia. Now, a lot of stories say Saturday and Sunday is when the official date of the movement began. But realistically, that carrier strike group left on Tuesday of last week. What actually left last Saturday was the USS Carl Vinson, which is a Nimitz-class carrier strike group. That means we have 3 carrier strike groups heading to the Middle East. 3.
Yep.
Let me put it to you this way. We have never sent that much boom to one conflict since World War II.
No, whoa, except
3 carrier strike groups.
Desert Storm, we sent battleships.
3 carrier strike groups to be on station simultaneously.
Desert Storm, we use those battleships as offshore artillery.
Right, but a carrier strike group includes missile boats, destroyers, cruisers, amphibious landing craft. If we still had battleships in circulation, they would be part of that. This is bigger than that. You got to remember, you're talking about, we sent the Missouri. I get it. It's glorious. It's a big boat. It's got 9 16-inch guns.
Sean, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Right. They sent carrier strike groups. Let me put it to you this way. The Gerald R. Ford strike group had 4 Arleigh Burke-class missile boat destroyers.
Yeah.
And a heavy cruiser. And tankers and tenders. and probably at least one, if not two, submarines in the group. Then you got the Gerald R. Ford strike group. Or, sorry, the Eisenhower strike group, which has probably got something similar in the mix. I promise by next episode I will lay out the entire naval strategy with all the boats. And now you've got the Carl Vinson. Now you got 3 carriers. The first carrier strike group brought 360 Tomahawk missiles to bear. What about the other 2? What about the submarines? What about their VTOL capabilities? What about their TLAM capabilities? Just saying. There's a lot of boom in the Med. A lot. And who's to say that they won't recall someone from, say, the Indian Ocean or the Red Sea up that avenue? Because we still got groups out there too. This is a fluid situation. Yeah, Tony says from what he's gathered, carrier strike groups have 2 subs. So that means there's 6 on station, potentially. Is an Ohio one of them? We know the Los Angeles class, Seawolf class, Virginia class subs. Those are in the circulation. How about a Boomer? How about an Ohio? Out of 3 carrier strike groups, is there at least one ICBM missile boat in that fray? I don't know.
Most likely.
We'll see. Moving on. Sorry, I spent way too much time on that.
It's fine.
Moving on. Facebook, formerly known as Facebook, now it's Meta. Meta announced plans last Friday to increase efforts to enforce its policies against violence and misinformation as a war in Israel stemming from Hamas terrorists' largest attack on the country in decades continues. The company, which owns Facebook and Instagram, established a, quote, special operations center with experts, including those who speak Hebrew and Arabic fluently, to monitor the social media platforms and remove content that violates Meta's policies faster. Basically, they're going to drive the narrative or censor it. In the first 3 days of the war in Israel, Meta removed or flagged more than 795,000 posts in Hebrew and Arabic for violating its policies on dangerous organizations and individuals, violent and graphic content, and hate speech, the company said. Side note, none of my posts on social media that let you know that we were running this show had been deleted. We stayed within the guidelines, which is why you're here today. Yay! Meta said Hamas is banned from Facebook and Instagram under its dangerous organizations and individuals policy. We want to reiterate that our policies are designed to give everyone a voice while keeping people safe on our apps. We apply these policies regardless of who is posting or their personal beliefs, and it is never our intention to suppress a particular community or point of view. At the time that this story came out, more than 2,800 people have been killed in the war in Israel thus far, including at least 1,300 Israeli civilians and soldiers and 30 Americans. Thousands more were wounded in the violence, and many others have been taken hostage by Hamas. Obvious. Moving on. If you needed another reason to realize that the majority of the youth of Iran fear their leaders and actually want change, I have a story for you. Now, you've probably heard me say this in a couple of episodes now, but I truly believe that the youth of Iran, Persia, those people, the college students, the young people, even the young adults, they don't toe the line of the Ayatollah. They just don't, because they've been protesting. The problem is they get rounded up, beaten, attacked, arrested, detained, executed by the Ayatollah, by the, Iranian Royal Guard. So they're sort of being held hostage by their own leaders, right? I'll show you how I know this. Many people in Iran...
Wait. How can you have a royal guard without a royal family?
I don't know. Maybe it was Iraq. Many people in Iran and the Iranian diaspora are standing up in support of Israel, despite the Islamic Republic's praise of the Hamas-led terror attacks on Israelis, an activist and journalist once said. It's just been incredible to see that these people who have been told that there are enemies are in fact not at all, says Emily Schrader, an Israeli-American journalist. They're our greatest defenders and greatest allies. I have nothing but love for the people of Iran, and I think I could speak for the majority, if not all, of Israeli citizens as well. Israel declared war on Hamas after the terror group launched a wide-scale attack on the Jewish state 2 weeks ago. On Friday, Israeli officials said over 1,300 civilians were killed by Hamas, while Palestinian authorities said that over 1,500 Palestinians had died from Israelis' retaliatory attacks. Iran is a known backer of Hamas and praised the attacks on Israel. The State Department has stated in the past that Iran provides some $100 million a year to Palestinian armed groups, including Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Since the initial attack, Schrader said that she has received many condolences from Iranians across the world, including those who currently live in Iran. It has been really moving to see how much the Iranian community, even inside the country, is supporting Israel, she says. Now, this should not come as a surprise to any of you. You have seen the protests of Iranian college students standing up saying enough is enough, this is ridiculous, we don't follow what these people are saying, we want to be just as free as the rest of the world. The problem is those who control the military and the police have more power than those who have been protesting against the power. But they are there and they are out there. Remember, Iran and Persians weren't officially dicks until the late 70s. And even then, it was only the radical religious sect of those who basically seized power, and then have ruled the country with an iron fist. Iran was a non-issue until they started taking Americans hostage in the late 70s. Let's be honest. And since then, they've been financially and militarily backing asshole groups since. So then the question becomes, do we not solve this problem in Israel until Iran's leadership is eradicated? Because they're the ones that perpetuate this and keep it going? I guess we'll know in the next coming couple of weeks. Moving on. Unless you have something you want to add.
No, keep going.
Okay. Moving on. I called this story Day 8. I think that was Saturday. Israel's military has ordered hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians to evacuate from Gaza City ahead of an anticipated Israeli ground offensive. Israeli Defense Forces say that Hamas terrorists are hiding in terror tunnels beneath houses and civilian buildings, and has called on civilians to leave the area before soldiers move in to destroy Hamas. I'm going to take a pause here. I'm going to read a comment. Woods asked, wouldn't this be true of the Palestinians? Most do not support Hamas. You would be correct. And the answer to that is part of this story, actually. Israel and the Israeli government and military realize exactly what you're asking. Palestinian people just want to be left the fuck alone. There are Palestinians who attended the rave that Hamas attacked and killed over 260 people. That rave, 2 Saturdays ago, was a show of solidarity that two peoples who live in close proximity with each other can coexist. So yes, it would be true of the Palestinians. There are Palestinian people who just want to be left the fuck alone. And they do not support Hamas. You're correct. Israel warned 1.1 million people living in the northern part of Gaza which has a total population of about 2 million people, to flee before the operation begins. See? So, act of mercy, warning, get the hell out, because if you're there after this period, we're going to kill you because you obviously didn't want to leave, which means you're part of the problem. Palestinians are now scrambling to evacuate while Hamas has reportedly told civilians to ignore the IDF's warning and stay at home. Of course they would, because if they left, they'd lose their human shields. Israel has amassed troops on the Gaza border, but no order to invade has yet come down. The war has claimed, at least at the time of that story, 3,200 lives on both sides. That has increased. President Biden has pledged unequivocal support for Israel as the Jewish state reels from what was the deadliest attack in its history, with at least 1,300 Israelis slaughtered as Hamas conducted rapes, torture, and took at least 120 hostages back to Gaza. I can tell you now that that number is north of 200. Woods asked, go where kids can't leave. The answer is coming, actually. I have a story for that, so sit tight, I'll explain. And they can leave, and they were given an opportunity to. But I'll get there, I promise. Moving on. There you go. The Israeli Air Force says it killed a senior commander in Hamas's commando forces, one who planned the terror attacks that massacred 1,300 Israelis on October 7th. The IAF said a drone strike killed Ali Qadi, a company commander in the Najaba force of Hamas, after obtaining intelligence from the Shin Bet security agency. According to the Israeli military, Qadi was arrested by Israel in 2005 for the kidnapping and murder of Israeli citizens and had been released to the Gaza Strip as part of a prisoner swap back in 2011. Ali Qadi led the inhumane, barbaric October 7th massacre of civilians in Israel. Israel Defense Forces have said, "We just eliminated him. All Hamas terrorists will meet the same fate." The military also said it killed Abu Merad, who was the head of Hamas's air forces. The Palestinian Health Ministry reports that 2,125 Palestinians have been killed and another 8,714 were wounded in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip since the war broke out on October 7th. Israeli military has said that the bodies of about 1,500 Hamas terrorists were found in Israeli territory after Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, killing as many as 1,300. Now remember, these are Saturday stories, I'm telling you. We're getting you caught up. Moving on. So, the question to answer Woods, or the answer to Woods' question, starts here. Israel and Egypt have reached an agreement to let U.S. citizens cross the border at Rafah on Saturday, as Israel continues to pummel Hamas, as a U.S. official said, according to the AFP. The border crossing at Rafah is the only crossing from Gaza into Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula. A U.S. official accompanying Secretary of State Antony Blinken on his tour in the Middle East reportedly said that the two countries agreed to keep the border open from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. The official said the United States did not yet have confirmation that the agreement was being implemented, but the intention was to have it open. The official added that Qatar, where Blinken visited Friday, has been pressuring Hamas, with which the Gulf nation has close ties, to allow movement, the report has said. Approximately 500 to 600 U.S. citizens in the Gaza Strip have contacted the U.S. government looking for information on how to leave the war zone. It is unclear if foreign nationals will be allowed to cross the border at Rafah. Now, that was at the time Saturday. Woods asked that most don't have cars. Gaza is a huge ghetto. Egypt said no. Where do they go? Killing civilians is a war crime. Killing civilians in response is also a war crime. The answer to that is they do have cars, they do have buses, they do have public transportation in Gaza, and the beauty of it is They have a main road that goes right down the strip, right to the Rafah checkpoint, which I'll show you here in a minute. Trust me, I have a story on this, and I do agree killing civilians in response to killing your civilians is technically a war crime, which is exactly why Israel raised the warning that you should leave the area. They gave them 24 hours notice and then a 5-hour window to cross the border at Rafah. You have to bear in mind that the Gaza Strip is only 29 miles long. It does not take all day to get over there. Now, I know you're saying that it's only Americans in that story. That was for that story. The Palestinians were also granted access, which I'll show you here in a minute. We'll get there, I promise. I promise. We'll cover this. I'm going to be thorough. Moving on. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari said Friday that the Israeli army recovered the bodies of several Israelis who had been missing since October 7th surprise attack by Hamas and notified their families, Haaretz reported. The Israeli army conducted raids in northern Gaza intended to purge the area of terrorists and enemy munitions and search for hostages. Soldiers destroyed terrorist infrastructure in squads, including a Hamas unit that fired anti-tank missiles towards Israel, he says. Hagari said the IDF found items that might lead to more missing Israelis held hostage by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Reports have indicated that as many as 150 Israelis were taken captive by Hamas in last week's surprise attack. Israeli officials are in contact with the families of those who are missing as the government negotiates for the release of their hostages. On last Friday, Israel's coordinator for hostages and missing persons, Brigadier General Gal Hirsch, established a team of about 200 reserve officers to establish a communication line with the families. We've recruited high-ranking, experienced officers for this sensitive and important task so we could aid families through the present uncertainty, Hirsch said, promising to make in-person visits to each family. We'll get there. Moving right along. We're a quarter of the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And I titled this story Airstrikes with a Y.
No, not that kind of Y.
No, I had to because it's a really good picture.
Mm.
Hamas terrorists on Saturday claimed 9 hostages, including 4 foreign nationals, were killed in the past 24 hours because of the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip. The Qassam brigades said Saturday the hostages were killed when Israel's military bombarded areas they were being held. Hamas claims could not be independently verified. Reports have indicated as many as 150 Israelis and foreigners were taken captive by Hamas in the October 7th surprise attack. Israel Defense Forces conducted raids in the northern Gaza on Friday in an effort to eliminate the threat of terrorists and weapons in the area and locate the hostages. The military said soldiers collected evidence that would help find other hostages currently held captive on the Strip. See? Quick. They said you killed hostages with your own airstrikes. Israel said, and Gaza said, yeah-huh. So that's basically what that is. Insanity continues to be on full display in other parts of the world. The Louvre Museum in Paris, which is in France, if you didn't know, which is the final scene of the Da Vinci Code, actually. The Louvre Museum in Paris is evacuating all visitors and staff and closed early Saturday because of a written threat. The museum, home to world-renowned masterpieces such as the Mona Lisa, said the threat was linked to France going on high alert after a Chechen immigrant on the country's extremist watch list allegedly stabbed a teacher to death there Friday. The Louvre Communication Service said no one else has been hurt and no incident has been reported. Paris police said verifications of the museum are underway. Police officers cordoned off the area as tourists and other visitors streamed out of the museum. French government raised the threat alert level and is deploying 7,000 troops to increase security after Friday's school attack. Government is also concerned about fallout in France from the war between Israel and Hamas. A suspect in Friday's attack allegedly shouted Allah Akbar during the attack. Of course they did. Moving on. We're still spilling out all over the world. Next. Thousands of people took to the streets of London for a massive pro-Palestinian demonstration as Israel wages war against the Palestinian terror group Hamas. More than 1,000 police officers have been deployed, and police have warned that anyone showing support for Hamas or straying away from the permitted route will be arrested, the BBC reports. The protest comes as Israel fights back after Hamas terrorists infiltrated the Jewish state and killed over 1,300 civilians, raping and torturing the innocent, beheading children, and taken an estimated 150 people captive. More than 3,200 people as of Saturday were killed on both sides as Israel has bombarded the Gaza Strip and gathered troops along the border for an anticipated ground assault. In London, people waved Palestinian flags and shouted, "Free Palestine." Metropolitan Police told reporters Friday that there has been a massive increase in anti-Semitic incidents in London since Hamas's attack on October 7th. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called the incidents disgusting and said intimidating or threatening behavior would be met with the full force of the law. I am the law.
All right, Stallone.
Moving on. See, we're getting through these. Remember this guy?
No.
Iran's foreign minister, Hossein Amirabdollahian. That's a hard name. Hossein Amirabdollahian said on Saturday, urged Israel to call off its attacks on Gaza, warning that the terror group Hezbollah could join the war. Could? It already happened, bro.
Already has.
Attacking Israel from the north. After meeting with Hezbollah leader Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, Amirabdollahian told reporters in Beirut that the Lebanese terrorist group is monitoring the ongoing war in Gaza and is prepared to join the conflict. You already did. I know about the scenarios that Hezbollah has put into place, Amirabdollahian says. Any step the resistance, Hezbollah, will take will cause a huge earthquake in the Zionist entity. Amirabdollahian added, I want to warn the war criminals and those who support this entity before it's too late to stop the crimes against civilians in Gaza, because it might be too late in a few hours. Israel considers Hezbollah its most serious immediate threat, estimating that it has some 150,000 rockets and missiles, including precision-guided missiles that could hit anywhere in Israel. The group, which has thousands of battle-hardened fighters who participated in Syria's 12-year conflict, also has different types of military drones. Israeli defense forces have clashed with Hezbollah terrorists along Lebanon's border with Israel several times since Hamas provoked the war with Israel on October 7th. My beef with this story is the bold-faced cheek of this guy demanding that Israel stops the crimes against the civilians of Gaza. Let me give you a history lesson. The Gaza Strip was agreed upon and abandoned by Israel 18 years ago, back in 2005. They left. They issued work visas for Gaza citizens to work in Israel and then go back home to Gaza peacefully to raise their families and earn a living. Now, to be fair, there was a stipulation. All construction had to be done by Israeli contractors. to prevent the idea of dual-purpose use to stack military weapons and stuff like that, or to strip them down and turn their building materials into IEDs. There was a stipulation. It was agreed upon. Technically, Israel has not messed with Gaza for 18 years. You don't get to make demands for the slaughter of your citizens after your people attacked their citizens first. That's my beef.
That's well placed.
I think so. Moving on. The Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, Saturday, claimed responsibility for fire directed at 5 Israeli outposts in disputed territory on the border between Israel and Lebanon. The Iranian-backed group said in a statement the attack took place in the disputed Shabah Farms area with guided missiles and mortar shells. Reuters reported heavy shelling of Israeli outposts in the area as well as the sound of gunfire. The IDF says that it returned fire at the source of the launches from Lebanon. Israel and Hezbollah fighters have traded fires several times in the past week since Palestinian terrorists with Hamas launched an attack on October 7th. Both terror groups have received backing from Iran. Hezbollah Deputy Chief Naim Qassem said on Friday that the group would not be swayed by calls by President Biden and others for it to stay on the sidelines of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, saying the group was fully ready to contribute to the fighting. Behind-the-scenes calls with us by great powers, Arab countries, envoys of the United Nations, directly and indirectly, telling us not to interfere, will have no effect, he told reporters gathered in southern Beirut suburb for a rally. Hezbollah knows its duties perfectly well. We are prepared and ready, fully ready, Qassem said. Oh, my sweet summer child, what happened to you on Sunday changed your tune very quickly. Moving on, as we have plenty of stories to get through. Here we go. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted photos Saturday of his recent visit with troops on the front line in the Gaza Strip. With our fighters in the Gaza Strip on the front line, Netanyahu posted on X, we are all ready. In a video shared in the post, Netanyahu asked troops, "Are you ready for the next stage?" The next stage is coming, he says, without stating what the next stage of Israel's conflict with Hamas actually is. Israel has called up 360,000 troops and amassed forces on the border with Gaza ahead of an anticipated ground assault to annihilate Hamas's capabilities. The terror group launched a surprise attack on Israel on October 7th, rampaging through communities in southern Israel and killing as many as 1,300 Israelis in the worst attack in the country's history. Israel has given the entire 1.1 million population of the northern half of the Gaza Strip, which includes the enclave's biggest settlement in Gaza City, until Saturday morning to move south. As the deadline approached, it said it would guarantee the safety of Palestinians fleeing on 2 main roads until 4 p.m. local time. That deadline expired with no immediate announcement from either side of any change in the situation. So, I'm going to address the chat because this is getting interesting. Woods is asking, are we answering a war crime with another war crime? Or are they? The answer to that question is a resounding no. You see, the thing is the original war crime was Hamas terrorists, without provocation, without warning, attacked Israel to the tune of 4,000 dumbfire rockets on October 7th. They didn't give a warning. They didn't say anything. They just started firing. Israel, in response, told the northern half of the 29-mile Gaza Strip, if you don't want to be associated with the people that we're setting out to annihilate, head south now. Get out of the area, because once that time expires, you will be an enemy to us because you were given plenty of warning. The warning they gave did not mention specific places. They said specifically a landmark Get south of this river, because everyone in the Gaza Strip knows that river. Later on, they posted on social media the actual road that went down the center of the Gaza Strip, the biggest road in the area, and said, "We will stop shelling this entire column so you can evacuate. If you do not heed our warnings, we are not responsible for your safety. But you have been given warning. You have a full weekend to get the hell out of a 29-mile strip of your country. Even on foot, you could do that." But they have public transportation, and buses, and cars, and animals, and everything else. But to your credit, and to be fair, and to be impartial, I do have a story on how that may have been interfered and hamstringed. I promise, I'm going to get to that, Woods. I'll tell you. There was some things that Hamas did that is truly despicable to prevent their own civilians from getting out. I will cover that. Moving on. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, that guy, said Saturday the recent surprise attack on Israel by Palestinian terrorists will lead to victory for all Palestinians over Israel. In comments reported by IRNA News, Khamenei said all countries in the Muslim world have a duty to support Palestine. A duty. Never mind anything you're doing abroad to make a living. It's your duty, right? Today, one of the representations of the power of Islam is the developments that are taking place in Palestine, Khamenei said during a meeting with Nigeria's Shia cleric Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaky.
Zaklat?
Zakzaki.
Zaklaki, okay.
No, Zakzaki. Z-A-K-Z-A-K-I.
Oh, Zak. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Earlier on Tuesday, Khamenei, who has final say on all state matters, rejected allegations about his country's role in Hamas's attacks against Israel and vowed to continue supporting Palestinian territories. Iran is a known backer of Hamas and praised the attacks on Israel. The State Department has stated in the past that Iran provides some $100 million a year to Palestinian armed groups, including Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Biden administration officials...
$100 million.
$100 million, not billion. The Biden administration officials have said that there is no specific evidence that Iran has helped Hamas plan and execute the attack on Israel, but acknowledged broad complicity by the Iranians in supporting terror throughout the region. Apparently, the Biden administration did not see the public announcement that yes, they were involved, and yes, they spent months planning this. No specific evidence except the admission that they had done that. Whatever. Moving on. I had to take a sip of a tasty beverage.
Okay.
All right, here we go. The Israeli military said on Saturday its forces were preparing a wide range of operational offensive plans to attack Hamas in Gaza. The military offensive will include combined and coordinated strikes from the air, sea, and land, Israeli Defense Forces have said. IDF battalions and soldiers were deployed across the country and are increasing operational readiness for the next stages of the war, with an emphasis on significant ground operations. Israel has called up 360,000 troops and amassed their forces on the border with Gaza ahead of an anticipated ground assault to annihilate Hamas's capabilities. The terror group launched a surprise attack on Israel on October 7th. This is all recap. Rampaging through communities in southern Israel and killing as many as 1,300 Israelis in the worst attack in the country's history. Israel has given the entire 1.1 million population of the northern half of the Gaza Strip, which includes the enclave's biggest settlement, Gaza City, until Saturday morning to move south. Another thing I should note is they extended that deadline several times, but it started off with you have 24 hours, just so you know. But it has been extended repeatedly, and I could say with absolute certainty, they still haven't invaded because they're waiting until the last second. They keep giving them chances. That is not what a belligerent nation does. Moving on. This asshole. Repeat. This asshole. The son of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. This asshole, if I wasn't clear, this asshole, attended a large pro-Palestinian march in Istanbul on Saturday. Asshole. Bilal Erdogan was accompanied by former Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu, a former Speaker of Turkish Parliament, Mustafa Sentop, the AP reported. Nightwoods. You can catch it on the replay. Let us make clear our side. We should at least let our feelings be heard, Erdogan told the AP. The crowd of over 1,000 people carried Palestinian and Turkish flags while chanting slogans criticizing Israel and the United States. In comments to the AP, Sentop said everyone with a conscience, regardless of race or religion, are displaying their sentiments toward this genocide. Question: who the fuck started it? Hamas called for Friday to be a day of rage and prompted massive protests all across the Muslim world against Israel's response to the Gaza attacks. Let me repeat that. Hamas called for Friday to be a day of rage and prompted massive protests all across the Muslim world against Israel's response to the Gaza attacks. Widespread demonstrations involving tens of thousands of people were reported in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, and the Middle East and other Middle Eastern nations, as well as European countries. You, sir, Bilal, are an asshole. You cannot criticize Israel while saying you're going to help broker a deal with another Jewish community in Ukraine. You dopey-headed son of a bitch. Maybe that's why
it's different. They're part Russian.
Maybe that's why you lost all your hair, because you were thinking so hard about your hypocrisy that the stress dropped all your hair. Asshole. Can you tell I don't like him? Asshole. Moving on. File this under duh. Remember this guy? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says that the U.S. should not be receiving any refugees from Gaza in light of the Hamas terror attack against Israel, after at least one left-wing Democrat suggested it. I will say, and I don't know what Biden's going to do, but we cannot accept people from Gaza into this country as refugees. DeSantis, who is running for the Republican 2024 presidential nomination, said on Saturday, I am not going to do that. Side note, I agree with him. DeSantis was speaking a week after the Hamas terror attacks against Israel that killed over 1,300 Israelis. Israel has since launched a counterattack against Hamas in Gaza, sparking a significant displacement of the population. The United Nations have said that more than 423,000 Gaza citizens have been displaced. The U.S., under the Biden administration, has expanded refugee settlements from a cap of 18,000 during the Trump administration to 125,000 now, although it did not come close to reaching that cap last year. Of the fiscal year 2024 allocation, 30 to 45,000 is allocated for refugees from the Near East and South Asia. Yes, Near East, not Far East. The humanitarian situation has led to some concerns from Republicans that refugees from Gaza could end up in the United States. Representative Jamal Bowman, Democrat of New York, told the New York Post that the U.S. should be open to accepting refugees from the area. Yeah, we should be open to accepting sleeper cells. Right, what a great idea. Let's put them in your house, asshole. See, they want to accept refugees until it actually goes into their backyard. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't mean me.
I know how we can get them to do a turn around.
Go ahead.
We just tell them we're sending them to Martha's Vineyard.
Right, that'll work. No, I think we should just, Jamal Bowman, you want these refugees? Let them stay at your place. Let them stay in your state. See how that works out. Anyway, 50% of the population in Gaza are children. You don't say. The international community, as well as the United States, should be prepared to welcome refugees from Palestine while being very careful to vet and not allow members of Hamas, he told the outlet. And how will you do that? How do you vet people that are trying to get over here? Questionnaire. Number 1, where are you from? Gaza. Good. Question number 2, are you from Hamas? No. Okay, cool, you can come in. Bullshit. So, an administration official was quoted as saying this week that the U.S. supports safe passage for civilians and provides support to Palestinian refugees through the support of the UN, including the UN Relief and Works Agency, while also engaging in a worldwide refugee resettlement program in partnership with the UN. But DeSantis cited anti-Israeli views from the area as a reason that they shouldn't be allowed into the U.S. He's quoted as saying, "If you look at how they behave, not all of them are Hamas, but they are all anti-Semitic. None of them believe in Israel's right to exist. None of the Arab states are willing to take any of them," he said. "The Arab states should be taking them if you have refugees. You don't fly people and import them halfway around to the world to the United States of America." He's right. He also noted that pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protests have taken place in the U.S. as well in other Western countries. "My view is very simple. If you don't like this country, if you hate America, then don't come to this country. We've got to start being smart about this." Do you find any fault in his argument?
No, but I also say if you're from this country and you speak out against this country, you shouldn't be here either.
Right, and I think we covered that last week, right? Heim and Reich. If you really, truly believe that the Palestinians are being disenfranchised, and you think that they should be freed and that they should fight for their survival, then get off your ass and hop on a plane and fly your ass to Palestine and go fight for them. Stand up for what you believe in.
What's the Muslim analog for Willie?
Willie?
Yes.
What do you mean, Willie?
Well, you know, remember the movie about the whale, Free Willy?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know.
I guess it would be like Free Ahmed.
That's racist.
I'm not trying to be racist. I'm just like, I don't know what.
I'm just saying what someone else is going to say. That's all I'm saying.
But, you know, Gavin's going to say that no matter what.
That's racist. My point is if you want to support Palestine, and if you really truly believe that Israelis are evil people, then instead of marching in cities all across the world, hop a plane, go to Gaza, and bolster their numbers, and go fight for that, and see where you land on the right side of history or not. If you win, history's written by the victor. If you lose, well, we're not going to miss you. Problem solved. So get off your couch, stop protesting in cities in America, because you're not winning wars here by protesting here for things that are going on over there.
Yeah, we don't want you here.
Get on a plane and go put your money where your mouth is. Because at least the Nazis that everyone keeps referencing and breaking Godwin's law repeatedly because apparently they can't find a modern interpretation of history, at least those guys got off their ass and fought for what they believed in. Heim in Reich. That's what it's called. 1939, the worldwide call to all national Germans to come back and fight for the fatherland. At least those people got off their ass and did something and stood for what they believed in. You're just barking like a dog that's got nobody listening to you in colleges all across the country. Nobody gives a shit what you think. Because you're wasting my taxpayer dollars paying off your student loans that you're defaulting on. You think I really give a shit what you think? No. Go fight for Palestine if you believe it so bad. Go do it. Moving on. See what Ron DeSantis did to me? Let's add one more to this fire.
Oh, please, let's.
Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona argued that the U.S. should not accept refugees from Gaza amid violence in Israel resulting from Hamas terrorists' largest attack on the country in decades. We should not take in 1 million refugees from Gaza, a region prone to terrorism and anti-Semitism, Biggs wrote on X. Where is the focus on our southern border, he asks. Good question, Andy. Let me know when you get an answer. But he's right. Basically, he's just, same opinion as DeSantis. We're not taking in refugees from Palestine. I'm sorry. Fuck no. Moving on. So, the question that Woods had previously asked, how do these people get out of the Gaza Strip? Let me remind you, the Gaza Strip is 29 miles long. If you were to run physically, the average person can cover a mile in somewhere between 6 to 10 minutes, depending on their physical fitness. If you were to walk that distance, the average person can cover a mile in 20 to 30 minutes at a comfortable pace. If you had carried your belongings and you had to pull a cart or a wagon or a stroller, let's just say you could cover a mile in about 45 minutes. I think that's fair, right? Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, that's fair.
He had 24 hours to cover 29 miles. Even loaded with shit on foot, you should be able to make it at least halfway across, which is, it puts you in the southern part of Gaza. They only warned the northern half of Gaza, which means they only had planned to attack to the 50-yard line. You were given ample warning. So now we can say you had a 24-hour warning to cross 14 and a half miles. There's no excuse why you couldn't do that. However, I'll give you one. I'll give you an excuse. I'll be fair and impartial. As weird as I've been tonight, I will be fair and impartial.
That's possible.
Yes. Israel's defense forces said Sunday, we're at Sunday now, that Hamas terrorists are blocking civilians who wish to leave from evacuating Gaza. IDF Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus said Sunday morning in a live stream on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, that Hamas is blocking the evacuation of its own civilians. Conricus said Hamas ordered residents in Gaza to ignore Israel's notice from Friday to evacuate the area as the IDF prepares for potential ground attack. Civilians who still attempted to leave were stopped by Hamas. Through the night, rockets were fired at Tel Aviv at southern Israel, Conricus said, adding that the fighting is happening in and around the northern part of the Gaza Strip as the IDF continues to attack different military targets belonging to Hamas. More than 3,600 people have been killed in the war since Hamas launched its attack last week, leading to retaliatory action from Israeli forces. Thousands more have been wounded, and many others have been taken hostage by Hamas and raped and tortured and murdered. Tony was saying that I thought there was only about 2 million people total in Gaza. We're going to take half in. No. There's about 2 million people total in the Gaza Strip. 1.1 million of them were told to head south. That was on Saturday. They were given a 24-hour notice. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is the Israelis still haven't done their invasion of Gaza, which means we've already passed the 24-hour deadline by 48 hours. So technically they've had 72 hours? There comes a point in time where you can only give the warning so many times, and if it's been ignored, you have to say, well, they're the enemy then. They had time to leave. We gave them 3 extra days. Then you go scorched earth. Sorry. It's just, war is hell, and there is collateral damage. Now, one can argue, well, the people of Gaza don't have social media or the news or this or that or this. No, they dropped leaflets. They had PA systems. They had maps. Look. You're asking a country who was deliberately attacked without warning to follow a standard that the very enemy that attacked them did not. It's almost like the Geneva Convention. Every enemy combatant that Western civilization has ever faced never abided by the Geneva Convention. Ever. So why have it? Oh, because we're better than them. Fuck that. Eye for an eye. Moving on.
I abide by the Geneva Convention.
Now I'm going to bring you a story about little Marco. Florida Senator Marco Rubio is asking President Biden to rescind visas for foreign nationals who defend or support Hamas amid the terror group's largest attack in decades. What you're seeing is solidarity among lawmakers. They're all saying the same thing. Don't let any of them in. America is the most generous nation on earth, but we cannot allow foreign nationals who support terrorist groups like Hamas and march in our streets calling for intifada to enter or stay in our country, Rubio wrote in a press release. Following the attack on October 7th, many Americans began participating in demonstrations supporting Hamas terrorists' attack on Israel, with several of these demonstrations happening at U.S. colleges and universities. Rubio's release says some people responsible for organizing and participating in the demonstrations across the U.S. supporting Hamas are in the country on visas. The Biden administration has the authority and an obligation under existing law to immediately identify, cancel the visas of and remove foreign nationals already here in America who have demonstrated support for terrorist groups, and in many cases even celebrated the slaughter of Israeli babies and the rape of Jewish girls, the Republican senator added. In addition to demanding the Biden administration apply our existing laws, I will introduce legislation to force them to act. Little Marco, welcome to the world stage. Thank you for speaking out. She's not going to be president, though. Moving on. We have reached the halfway point. This is the path to safety I was talking about, that Woods asked about. The Israeli military urged Gazan civilians to flee southward along a specified evacuation route on Sunday, clearing out a 3-hour window in which the IDF would not fire a single shot at the route. The IDF alerted Gazans of the window via social media and airdropped flyers this weekend. So there's no excuse. Physical, on paper printed warnings and social media. Okay? You were given all of that. Israeli forces are currently preparing for an all-out assault on the northern half of Gaza, planning to infiltrate from land, air, and sea. Residents of Gaza City and northern Gaza in the past days, we've urged you to relocate to the southern area for your own safety. We want to inform you that the IDF will not carry out any operations along this route from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. During this window, please take the opportunity to move southward from northern Gaza. Your safety and that of your families matters. Please follow our instructions, and head south. Be assured, Hamas leaders have already ensured their safety and that of their families, but not yours. Yes, Israel has a navy. Moving on. See how fast these are? Even after a week of attacks, Hamas terrorists were still able to fire rockets out of their hiding places in the northern half of Gaza, despite a week of Israeli bombardment up until Sunday. Fox News foreign correspondent Trey Yingst says rockets continued to fly out of northern Gaza towards Israeli targets throughout the weekend. Israel's military is planning a full-ground invasion of Gaza, using its power on the land, air, and sea in the coming days. Israel has planned to carry out the invasion this weekend, but was delayed due to poor weather conditions that have hampered the Air Force's ability to support the ground troops. Yingst added that many people are concerned Israel's invasion of Gaza could just be the beginning of a wider escalation of conflict in the Middle East. Look at the moment of American military assets headed in this direction. The evacuation of U.S. citizens by sea, Iranian foreign ministers meeting with the leader of Hamas, attacks from Hezbollah, uncertain days, he wrote on X. And, naturally, it has become inevitably political. Again, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis doubled down on his demand that the U.S. not accept any refugees from Gaza amid Israeli war against Hamas on Sunday. DeSantis said on CBS's Face the Nation that every 2024 presidential candidate should weigh in on whether Gazan refugees should be welcomed in the U.S. He went on to say that Israel has every right to use whatever pressure it can to secure the release of hostages in Gaza and retaliate against Hamas terrorists, including shutting off the water and electricity. The popular Florida governor first laid out his stance against accepting Gazans on Saturday, highlighting that none of the Arab states in the Middle East were willing to accept refugees either. If you look at how they behave, not all of them were Hamas, but they're all anti-Semitic. None of them believe in Israel's right to exist. None of the Arab states are willing to take any of them, DeSantis said. Arab states should be taking them in if you have refugees. You don't fly and import them all the way across the world to the United States. My view is very simple. If you don't like this country, and if you hate us, then why come here? We've got to start being smart about this. Well, duh. Moving on. A Gaza resident described Hamas terrorists confiscating car keys and IDs in order to prevent Gazan citizens from heeding Israeli warnings to evacuate to the south, according to a phone call recorded by Israeli forces. The IDF revealed the recording Sunday, saying it was a conversation between a Gazan resident and Israeli intelligence officers. In the conversation, the resident tells the officer that Hamas confiscated street by street, door by door, confiscated people's personal belongings, including their car keys and identification, to prevent them from heading south for safety, as instructed by the IDF. This is further evidence that the Hamas terrorist organization is actively preventing Palestinians from evacuating south in order to protect themselves, it added. Israeli forces had urged civilians in Gaza to flee the northern region as the IDF prepares for a ground invasion against Hamas. Israel has previously shown Hamas roadblocks, which it said prevented civilians from leaving. Hamas has long used innocents as human shields and frequently places its weapons caches and command centers in or around places like hospitals, schools, and mosques. You don't say. Moving on. I'm just going to keep moving through these as quickly as possible, unless you want to add something, Mike.
Yeah, if I want to add anything, I'll let you
I'm
know.
sure. All right, so Republicans in the House of Representatives will soon introduce legislation that would block the U.S. from accepting refugees from Gaza displaced by Israelis' wars against Hamas. Representatives Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin, Andy Ogles, probably Andy Ogles, Tennessee, will introduce the Guaranteeing Aggressors Zero Admission Act, or the Gaza Act. That's creative. Which aims to prevent the Biden administration from granting a single visa to holders of Palestinian passports. I like that. We cannot let President Biden abuse our parole and visa rules to bring unvetted Palestinians into American communities the way he did with thousands of unvetted Afghans. Tiffany said this on the legislation in a post on X. The bill would also prohibit the Department of Homeland Security from allowing Palestinians into the country through its parole program. According to the report, experts believe that there could be more than 1 million Palestinian refugees from Israel's bombardment of Gaza. The move comes a day after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis stated that the U.S. should not accept any Palestinian refugees. He argued that while not all Gazans are members of Hamas, they are all anti-Semitic. None of them believe in Israel's rights to exist. Moving on. See, we're getting through these quick now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces are ready to exterminate the bloody monsters of Hamas in a ground invasion of Gaza that now appears to be imminent. Netanyahu made the comments during a meeting of his war cabinet on Sunday, saying the military stands ready to act at any moment. Israel spent the weekend warning civilians. Remember, it was a 24-hour warning, but he spent the entire weekend instead. So that's 48 hours. Just so you know. Warning civilians in Gaza to move south as quickly as possible. Israeli forces plan to invade northern Gaza by land, air, and sea in the next coming days. We are ready to act at any moment to exterminate the bloody monsters that rose up against us, Netanyahu said. Hamas thought we should be demolished. It is we who will demolish Hamas. Among Israel's top targets is Hamas commander Yahya Sinwar, who is being held responsible for carrying out the unprecedented October 7th attack that left at least 1,400 people dead in Israel, including at least, at that time, 29 Americans. The total is now 30, by the way. He is the mastermind behind this, just like bin Laden was. He built his career on murdering Palestinians when he understood they were collaborators. That's how he became known as the Butcher of Khan Younis in southern Gaza. IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht said Sunday, "That man and his whole team are in our sights. We will get that man." Good. Do it. Do it. Do it. Moving on. Mike, if this offends you, I apologize. Israel's foreign minister Eli Cohen reportedly called out the Vatican for not issuing a clear and unequivocal condemnation of Hamas after their terrorists began attacking Israel last week. According to the Times of Israel, Cohen told Paul Gallagher, the Holy See's secretary for relations, that Israelis expect the Vatican to come out with a clear and unequivocal condemnation of the murderous terrorist actions. It is unacceptable that you put out a statement expressing worry primarily for Gazan civilians while Israel is burying 1,300 of its own that were murdered by them. Pope Francis had recently affirmed Israel's right to defend itself and offered prayers to victims, because we know that that helps. I continue to follow what is happening in Israel and Palestine with tears and apprehension. Many people killed, others injured, the Pope said on Wednesday. I pray for those families who have seen a feast day transformed into a day of mourning, and I ask the hostages be released immediately. At least 1,400 Israelis have been killed since Hamas launched a surprise attack last Saturday on the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. Palestinian authorities say that more than 2,300 Palestinians were killed, with over 9,000 wounded. Well, the Pope thinks both sides are godless. It's possible. Moving on. Remember this guy? Yeah. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made two strong humanitarian appeals to Israel and Hamas on Sunday as the war between the two continues. In this dramatic moment, as we are on the verge of the abyss in the Middle East, it is my duty as Secretary General of the United Nations to make two strong humanitarian appeals, Guterres said. To Hamas, the hostages must be immediately released without conditions, he wrote. To Israel, rapid and unimpeded access for humanitarian aid must be granted for humanitarian supplies and workers for the sake of the civilians in Gaza. Gaza has been running out of electricity, water, and food since Israel blocked entry into the Gaza Strip last week. Guterres explained that the UN has stocks of food, water, and medical supplies, and more across the Levant. These goods can be dispatched within hours, the statement said. To ensure delivery, our selfless staff on the ground, along with NGO partners, need to be able to bring these supplies into and throughout Gaza safely and without impediment to deliver to those in need. Each one of these two objectives are valid in themselves, Guterres affirmed. They should not become bargaining chips, and they must be implemented because it is the right thing to do. This story should illustrate to any and all of you watching this podcast tonight or in the future that the United Nations has become the voice of a movement that has ensured that no nation will ever achieve victory in what it used to be known as total war. You cannot stop a military from achieving its goals in a total war, especially if they are on a counter-offensive after being on the defensive from a surprise attack. This guy speaks treason on a global scale. This just further proves how useless, feckless, and nutless and worthless the United Nations has become. And NATO's not that much farther behind. Look no further than how long the conflict in Ukraine has been going on. Today is day 601 if you are on that side of the world. 600 for the rest of us. Neither one of these groups has world peace in mind. They just don't. They just don't. They just perpetuate bullshit. This will not end until the aggressor is annihilated. But that's not what Guterres is about, is he? No. He's about dressing up in his penguin suit and having fancy lunches and taking photo ops. I'm sorry. He's useless. He's just useless. I'm 44 years old. Okay, I still have the last half of my life to live, and I can tell you right now, that guy's a waste of space. Moving on. Do you believe him? Who? This guy. This guy here. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas asserted that Hamas terrorist attacks do not represent his people. Palestinian outlet Wafa reported on Sunday. Abbas, who is also chairman of the PLO, that used to be led by Yasser Arafat, by the way, reportedly told Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on a phone call that the PLO is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. So he told a dictator in Venezuela that the PLO is in charge. So do something about it then, bro. The president affirmed his rejection of the killing of civilians on both sides and called for the release of civilians, prisoners, and detainees on both sides, Wafa added. Abbas previously told the King of Jordan on Thursday that he rejects the practices of killing civilians or abusing them on both sides because they contravene morals, religion, and international law. That's pretty good word salad you're tossing there. We renounce violence and adhere to international legitimacy, peaceful popular resistance, and political action as a path to achieving our national goals, Abbas was previously quoted as saying. I could take that picture and put the words "I want to believe" under there in the font of the poster that you originally saw on the X-Files. If he is not a wolf in sheep's clothing, if he is not lying, if he is a true believer, then I can back what he says. Arafat died for what he believed in, didn't he? Just saying. Moving on. We're almost done, by the way. A U.S. State Department spokesman announced that at least 30 Americans, 30 of your fellow countrymen, have died as a result of the Israeli-Hamas war, which began October 7th. At this time, we can confirm the deaths of 30, I repeat, 30 U.S. citizens. Go back to episode 2, look at the number. Go back to episode 1, look at the number. Shocking how it increases as much as it has. We extend our deepest condolences to the victims and to those families of all affected. The spokesman also said that 13 additional Americans are still unaccounted for, and officials are actively searching for them. Start checking mass graves. The U.S. government is working around the clock to determine their whereabouts and is working with the Israeli government on every aspect of the hostage crisis, including sharing intelligence and deploying experts from across the United States government to advise the Israeli government on hostage recovery efforts. Send in John McClane. Oh wait, he has aphasia. Sorry, really bad joke.
That's bad, yes.
Moving on. In case you needed a reminder of the uselessness of the United Nations. Sorry, can you tell I'm in a mood? Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, called out a United Nations official who reportedly failed to condemn Hamas in a statement amid its war against Israel. UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, man, that's a lot of word salad, Martin Griffiths, had made a social media post calling attention to Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. The specter of death is hanging over #Gaza, his post on X read. With no water, no power, no food, and no medicine, thousands will die, plain and simple. Erdogan responded by criticizing the double standards that he accused Griffiths of having. Thousands of Israelis were murdered and maimed in the Hamas Nazis' barbaric terror attack. You broke Godwin's law. And tens of thousands more will be massacred in the future if this savage terror group is not obliterated, Erdogan wrote. Have you been living under a rock? Your double standards truly show no bounds. Where was your outcry when Hamas funneled all UN funds to dig terror tunnels and manufacture rockets targeting Israeli civilians? When Hamas diverted every resource, water, energy, and civilian infrastructure, from the Gazan population to their terror capabilities, Erdogan added. He's not wrong. He's calling these guys out. The UN just loves spinning word salad. But moving on, because I'm going to take you to Ron DeSantis, one more time. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced on Sunday that he helped successfully transport hundreds of Americans from Israel amid the war against Hamas. Good. Does that mean he used his own campaign finance funds? I am proud of how quickly we have been able to activate resources and do what the federal government could not. Get Floridians and other Americans back home, reunited with their families, free of charge, DeSantis said in his press release. The governor announced the news in a video posted to X. Speaking from an airport in Tampa on Sunday night, DeSantis said that he was getting ready to welcome the Americans back on U.S. soil. We're having our first flight of people rescued from Israel. It has landed. Over 260 people that wanted to get back to the United States and couldn't do it, DeSantis said. There was a devoid of leadership, so we stepped up and led. We're happy to be able to deliver that. So we're getting ready to welcome them back to the United States of America, he added. He does get results, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Can't deny it. I still don't think he's going to win the White House, but he does good work.
Yeah.
He's got to have a future in politics somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
It looks to me that Tony says it looks to me that there's a concerted effort to make Israel to be the villain in this deal. Yes. Because the woke, the politically inept, the media in a lot of parts of the world, they're capitulating to pro-Palestinian movements. Look, no one's saying that Palestine doesn't have the right to exist. Everyone's just saying, stop sending rockets into your neighbors. Like, they've been talking about the two-state solution for so long, and it's still not getting done, right? If they're fighting over the Holy Land over a specific city, why can't they just Berlin Wall that specific city and give each person a half, or each side a half? I know the answer to that, because all the surrounding areas are not one group's and not the others. So I sort of get it. It's kind of annoying, though. It's going to get to the point where I think if the world really wanted to say enough is enough, they would take the Palestinians and they would take the Israelis, and they would put them in a room, and they would say, look, you people are upset by the fact that we, in 1948, forced a lot of displaced Jewish people into this territory that we named Israel, and we said, y'all just deal with it. Okay? There's a lot of animosity there. As a fan of history and brushing along the edges, if you were a Palestinian living in the region in 1948, and all of a sudden a massive influx of Jewish people, refugees, were placed in your backyard, and the world said, just fucking deal with it, you would have a bone to chew. I am not denying that. And look, let's get something clear, okay? My co-host here, Night Strike, he has a Catholic background, okay? I don't judge it. I don't judge him for it. And if that's what gives him peace at the end of the day, then more power to him. I am a practicing atheist. I have been that way for most of my life. I'm not the type of person who belittles religion, okay? I've read all your books. All of them.
Well, let me put one caveat here, okay?
Sure.
Just because whatever religion you are, you has a leader.
Yes.
That leader doesn't necessarily always speak for all the followers.
Correct. That leader may have his own agenda.
His own agenda, his own opinions, and sometimes they may coincide with the followers, but not every believer in that religion is going to agree with the leader.
Correct.
And that's what I want to get out there.
See, and I don't have a religious leader because I don't have a religion, right? But I'm one of those people at the end of the day who says, look, if that's what gives you peace at the end of the day and you can function as a human being because you have an escape, a spiritual escape, more power to you, you know? Like, it's cool. Go ahead. It's like the whole LGBTQIA plus and however many more letters they want to add in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if that's what you want at the end of the day, and that's what brings you a sense of normalcy, and it doesn't affect me, like, you're not pushing it on me, you're just doing your thing, okay, that's fine. Great. Go ahead. You know, if you identify as a pineapple or an attack helicopter or whatever, you know, whatever brings you peace. If you can get up every day and go to work and function and provide to society and pay your taxes and do whatever, fine, right? Go ahead. Just don't tell me that I have to deal with it. Like, you go do your thing, I go do my thing. Whatever you do behind closed doors when the lights go out with your partner, that's you. That's cool. Whatever. I'm not going to go peeking in your window. Go be happy. If you want to put square peg in round hole or curly Q and attack whatever, right? That's you. That's you. Some of us are perfectly happy with playing for Team Tuna when I'm Team Sausage. Like, I'm fine with that, right? There's plenty of women in the world that I'm never going to get bored of them. That's me. Same thing with religion, right? If you pray to a god with 2 hands, or if you pray to a god with 10 arms, or Cthulhu with 10 tentacles, whatever, just as long as you don't bug me with it, you know? If this conflict gets to the point where the pre-1948 powers that be of the region has to get involved and say, look, you obviously can't handle being here, and you obviously can't handle having these people here, then it's going to get to the point where they're like, fuck you, neither one of you get it. It's going back under British colonial rule. Because guess who administered the area before 1948? The British. So if you want to go back to that, fine, because neither one of you can handle it yourselves. Do you really want to go back to that?
Sean, why don't we go a little bit further than that?
Go on. I don't want to go back to the Ottomans.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. You know, they weren't happy with the Ottomans. They weren't happy with the British. They're not happy with, with their current leadership.
They're going to be happy.
That's my point.
So that means none of them get it.
Exactly.
So
that means they want to burn everything to the ground.
I'm just going back to the previous governors of the area, right? Because the biggest bone of contention right now is you have Palestinians and people who follow the Muslim faith feeling disenfranchised because the world who won the world war decided to take these people and send them there and tell the current residents, just fucking deal with it. Right?
Ask the Indians how that worked out.
That's what happened in 1948. Just fucking deal with it. Okay? That's not fair to whoever was there. Even I will understand and say, you know what, that's kind of fucked up. Like, even I will agree to that, right? But if you're not going to find a peaceful way to coexist, then it's like you're a parent and your 2 children are fighting, right? Over a dog or a doll. Let's say a doll, right? They're fighting over a doll, a brother and a sister. Neither one of them, they both want it. Neither one of them can say, can we share it? You as the parent smack both of them on the back of the head and go, you know what? Fuck it. Neither one of you get it anymore. And then you take that doll and you throw it to the dog and let him chew it up in front of him. That's what it's going to get to. Because if neither one of you 2 can peacefully deal with it, then guess what? Maybe neither one of you 2 should have it. It's going to get to that point. And it's unfortunate. Because that means somebody has to be the adult. And it has to admit that both of those people are acting like children. For a very adult situation. Who's going to smack them in the back of the head? The atom. The nuke. Clearly. Because we're not going to do it. The United States is sick and tired of being the police of the world. You might think we're not, but let me tell you, us, the American voter, we're tired of it. Here's a phrase for you if you're from another country that's watching this, need to understand. Voter fatigue. Guys like me, guys like Mike, guys like Tony, guys like PNW Woods, guys like Terry Scherer, guys like everybody who watches this, we're voters. We're sick and tired of it. One of these days, we're going to tell our government, our two fighting children, if you two can't get along and make something work, then neither one of you gets power. And we'll find another solution. It's just how it is. We're done with this. We're tired of this. The world is tired of what's going on in the Middle East. Americans are tired of what's going on within our own Washington, D.C. It's everywhere. I'm sure wherever you're from, if you're in England, you're probably tired of your 8 different parties in your parliament and your bickering and fighting, right? If you're in Japan, you're probably tired of your higher house and your lower house and whatever. Like, it's the human condition. And eventually, Joe Q Public, in wherever you're from, is going to be like, enough. Because let's be honest, right? At the end of the day, most of us want 2 things: our belly full and our noodle wet. That's it. We don't care about anything else. But if you keep hammering this in front of us over and over and over, we're going to be like, fine. If you really want to know what I think, none of you idiots should be in charge. Then you're going to hate what we say about it. So, figure it out. That's what it's getting to. Moving on, because that was a tangent that went way too long. Let's talk about the Rafah
I kept what I had to say short. You went on a tangent.
You fed it to me.
I did not feed anything to you.
Let's move on. This is the Rafah border crossing. For those of you who are unaware, the Rafah border crossing is the southern end of the Gaza Strip that feeds directly into the Sinai Peninsula, which is that little teardrop-shaped part of Egypt. The Rafah crossing connecting Egypt and Gaza temporarily reopened at 9 a.m. local time Monday, today, providing the last remaining exit for Palestinians wanting to evacuate the violence in Israel ahead of a potential ground attack from Israeli forces. Civilians in Gaza were urged by Israeli forces last week to evacuate the area in preparation for the ground attack, although Hamas terrorists have reportedly prevented residents from leaving. With the crossing reopening, humanitarian aid will now be able to pass through Gaza. The crossing had been shut down for Israelis' retaliatory airstrikes against Hamas earlier this week. We anticipate that the situation at the Rafah crossing will remain fluid and unpredictable, and it is unclear whether or for how long travelers will be permitted to transit the crossing. This came from the U.S. Office of Palestinian Affairs in their statement. If you assess it to be safe, you may wish to move closer to the Rafah border crossing. There may be very little notice if the crossing opens, and it may only be open for a limited time, which means Act Now supplies are limited. The U.S., Israel, and Egypt reached an agreement for a temporary ceasefire as the crossing reopens after more than a week of violence in Israel, stemming from a surprise attack by Hamas terrorists. Sorry, I probably read that wrong. The U.S., Israel, and Egypt reached an agreement for a temporary ceasefire as the crossing reopens after more than a week of violence in Israel, stemming from surprise attacks from Hamas terrorists. There you go. Israeli Prime Minister wrote Monday morning on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, that there is no ceasefire, in response to reports of a temporary ceasefire while the Rafah crossing is open as an exit route. More than 3,600 people have been killed since Hamas launched its largest attack against the Jewish state in decades, leading to retaliatory action from Israeli forces. Thousands more have been wounded and many others have been taken hostage by Hamas. And, with that comes rape, torture, and imprisonment. Moving on.
Moving on.
I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is your 5-story warning. And then we get to the thing that Tony asked for. See, we're almost done.
Almost.
Promise. Almost. Okay. The Senate is back in session Tuesday. Tomorrow. News from the future, right? And funding the government with aid to Israel and Ukraine will be at the heart of their negotiations. A source familiar with the talks said that the upper chamber will be awaiting the official supplemental request from the Biden administration before an official package is drafted, which could take more than a week. The upper chamber was briefed on a call last week by the administration of a mega package request that would combine aid to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and U.S. border security, according to a source familiar. Side note, didn't they just fucking vote on single-issue bills?
Yes.
Oh, wait, that was the House, and they don't have a speaker, so they're powerless right now. Got it. I said that. I did that on purpose to lead into that. Expected floor action for the week is on 3 separate appropriations bills combined into one legislative package for the 2024 fiscal year, which includes funding for the FDA and the Departments of Veterans Affairs, Transportation, and Housing and Urban Development. The temporary spending patch that the upper chamber agreed on before September 30th's deadline that will expire on November 17th. On Tuesday, the Senate Intelligence Committee will convene for a closed-door briefing. Senate leaders will resume their weekly luncheons, family, fancy, catered lunches, with a corresponding press conference, for word salad, where aid to Israel and Ukraine is likely to be the topic of discussion. Let me put this into perspective for you. The government nearly shut the fuck down because they couldn't come up with the money when their bills hit the trillions with a T, and yet they're talking about spending billions with a B of your taxpayer dollars to aid Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and Taiwan. Oh, and the border at the very end as a footnote. Right? They can't keep the government running with trillions, but they're already talking about hitting the ground running for bills everywhere else, only in the billions.
Are you really surprised about this?
No, I'm just trying to incite the audience to remember this come election day. Stop being fooled by what Washington is telling you. That's all I'm saying.
I was just going to say don't vote for a Democrat.
I am beginning to become of the opinion that both parties is like the WWE. They talk a lot of shit on camera, and when the cameras turn off, they're having orgies and having dinner and cocktails at the end of the day with each other.
Most likely.
They both play for the same team because they both only serve themselves. And the funny thing is when you hear billions and trillions, that should make you realize how much of your taxpayer money they get, not what they're taking from you individually. Think about the collective total of tax money. If they can write these trillion-dollar budgets, that's how much power we, the American people, have collectively. We provide trillions so they can squander it in stupid bullshit. Remember this conversation in November. Moving on. Here we go. And as soon as it was opened, it was Well, the Rafah crossing at the Egypt-Gaza border was closed after a brief reopening early Monday morning as residents fled the impending Israeli invasion. The crossing was the last remaining exit for Gazans. Israel warned residents to flee northern Gaza throughout the weekend as Israeli defense forces prepared a ground invasion, and there were widespread reports of Hamas terrorists hampering or outright blocking Gazan citizens from leaving. Egypt and all other nearby Arab nations have so far refused to take on large numbers of Gazan refugees displaced in the conflict. The crossing had originally been shut down due to Israel's retaliatory strikes against Hamas earlier this week. Sorry, had a sneeze.
Mm-hmm.
We anticipate that the situation at the Rafah crossing will remain fluid and unpredictable, as it is unclear whether or for how long travelers will be permitted to transit the crossing, the U.S. Office of Palestinian Affairs said in a statement. If you assess it to be safe, you may wish to move closer to the Rafah boarding crossing. There may be little notice if the crossing opens or closes and may only be open for a limited time. Think about this. They opened it and they closed it less than 3 hours later. They're fucking with their own people. It's like that commercial. Ooh, you almost got it. With that fisherman and the money with insurance.
And then the $1 bill, yeah.
Yeah, you almost got it. You almost got away. Now you gotta die. That's basically what they're saying. They're fucking with their own people. Moving on. This story, it's short, but it warmed my heart when I read it. I really, because I dated a girl from this country, and she had a heart of gold. She was sweet. She really was. The Lebanese military. Now remember, Hezbollah is stationed in the south part of Lebanon, and we're attacking Israel. Okay? Just to set the table for you. The Lebanese military destroyed 20 different rocket launching sites that Hezbollah was using to attack Israel in their own country of southern Lebanon. See, this is proper behavior. Hezbollah, a powerful Iranian-backed terrorist group, has threatened to join Hamas in the war against Israel. The group has launched anti-tank guided missiles over the Lebanon-Israel border in recent days, leading to Israeli reprisals. The reported attacks on Hezbollah rocket positions indicate that there is clear disagreement in Lebanon regarding whether to challenge Israel. The news comes as Hezbollah began destroying surveillance cameras on several army posts along the border on Monday today. Hezbollah's military media arm released a video showing snipers destroying surveillance cameras placed on 5 points along the Lebanon-Israeli border, including one outside the Israeli town of Metula. Hezbollah's aim appears to be to prevent the Israeli army from monitoring movements on the Lebanese side of the border. Why does this warm my heart? The Lebanese are driving out the garbage in their country. That is what a country does. Why have the people of Gaza not stood up and eradicated Hamas in their part of the country? Take note, Palestinians. This is how you kill cancer. You cut it out of your own body. Learn from this. Moving on. There was a story the other day where Vladimir Putin decided to give his opinion on what's going on in Israel, and he was trolled worldwide by people who said, "Don't you have a war yourself to finish losing?" Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a phone call later Monday. Senior Israeli officials say that the call will likely take place Monday evening, which it's already Tuesday morning over there, so this already happened. No details have been offered regarding what either party seeks to gain from their conversation. It will be the first time the two leaders have spoken since Hamas's attack on October 7th. The call comes as IDF forces appear poised to carry out their ground operation in northern Gaza. Putin offered Russia to serve as a mediating party between Hamas and Israel this weekend. What matters now is to stop the bloodshed, Putin said Friday. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has vowed to exterminate the bloody monsters of Hamas, and the U.S. has backed up Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas targets. Also, that was followed up by the world trolling Putin, saying, "Why does anyone care what you think? You're losing a war against another country. You lost the navy. You lost your navy against a country that has no navy. How does that make you look?"
They lost their Black Sea Fleet flagship.
Against a country that has no navy.
Mm-hmm.
Now listen, I'm going to admit, I'm going to eat a little bit of crow here. Once upon a time, I don't think it was the War Room. I think it was when I used to just do the weekend review.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say things like, Vladimir Putin is what a real leader looks like. And back then, I believed it. Because he was action man. And he kept his country together. And he led them. And it was great. But when he started messing with Ukraine, I lost all respect for the guy. Like, it was like going on a blind date with a supermodel, right? And everything's going great. And then you start heavy petting and you feel balls. And you're just like, whoa, I ain't about this. Putin, sorry. You lost your balls. I can't believe you no more. Fuck off my screen.
Wait. You liked with balls in the first place?
No, I liked Putin as a leader until he started picking a fight with Ukraine.
Okay.
When he was a leader before he picked a fight with Ukraine, I could buy Zenico stuff and not get my stuff confiscated as an import ban. I can't even do that anymore. Moving on. I have a story here called Why the Second Amendment is Important. So if you're a gun guy, this story's for you.
We had a conversation about this today, too.
Yes, we did. The Israeli government is distributing 10,000 rifles. I thought it was 1,000. It was 10,000 rifles. Let me repeat that. The Israeli government, the government that has the strictest gun control in the region, that gave Amit so much bullshit about his carry weapon and stuff, right?
He eventually got it, though.
Well, no, you can have one, but if you wanted a different one, you had to give up the one you currently had. That's stupid. It's like
he fixed it.
It's like, I got this Beretta, right? It's like, okay, I got this Beretta, this is my carry pistol. Oh, there's a SIG over there. I want that SIG. Israel says, you can have that SIG, bro. Cool, but you have to give up your Beretta. What?
Actually, you know, I remember when we were having this conversation.
He complained about that back in the day.
No. This is the funny thing. We were talking about him, and he's like, "What gun should I use for my carry gun?" I go, "What's available?" He's like, "Well, I have a line on a Luger and a P38."
Neither.
And I'm like, I don't think that'd be no, probably something more modern. And he's
Neither.
like, "Yeah, you're probably right."
Yeah. So, the Israeli government is distributing 10,000 rifles. I can't reiterate this enough. This is a country that has 9 million citizens. To Israeli citizens living in towns near its northern and southern borders, the officials said Monday. Israeli Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir, that sounds like Sturmgewehr. Purchased the rifles. Get this. He bought them and then gave them away. Huh? Purchased the rifle early last week and has expedited the process for hundreds of thousands of Israelis to be approved to keep and bear arms. I call on everyone who who is eligible to receive a life-saving weapon, he said in his statement on X. The 10,000 rifles are being distributed to civilian security teams, some of which were able to fight off Hamas terrorists last week using only pistols. Members of at least one team told the Times of Israel that the Israeli Defense Forces had taken their rifles sometime prior to the Hamas assault. Now, to be fair, they came and confiscated the rifles because the IDF needed them. But now, the citizenry are being armed again because they get results. The Second Amendment of the United States U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments that were necessary for the ratification of the U.S. Constitution of the United States, the laws of our land, that did not get ratified until 1791 because of political infighting, even though we won the War of Independence over a decade prior. Those 10 amendments were so important, and the Second Amendment was so important to the Founding Fathers because they wanted to be able to give the common man, you and me, the ability to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government, whether foreign or domestic. We figured it out, 300 years ago? We figured it out back then. Israel is finally figuring it out. We should embrace this. We should encourage this. Because they are proof of why we need it. Ukraine is also proof of why they need it. This was a good story to share. Because those people had very, very strict gun rules. Those rules are now out the window, out of necessity. Tony's going to miss his story. He's going to go to bed. I'm about to hit the Iron Dome story, and he's fixing to go to bed. Let me get through this quickly in case he's going to tough it out. Good idea. President Biden has postponed his planned visit to Colorado today and will remain instead at the White House as Israeli forces appear poised to invade northern Gaza. Now remember, this invasion is 2 days delayed because they wanted to make sure all Palestinians who didn't want to be in the fight to get out. White House officials say Biden will participate in national security meetings throughout the day. His planned trip to Colorado would have been focused on his Bidenomics agenda. The president's trip to Colorado is postponed indefinitely, but it will be rescheduled. The president will remain at the White House to participate in any and all national security meetings. Cool. I am done with the stories of the day. I'm going to try to get through this next part because Tony needs to get some sleep. He asked me last week in a comment, and I was very graciously willing to do this. So let's get this started, shall we? Tony, this should only take a few minutes. This is the picture here. Now, I'm going to read you an article, okay? But this should explain what you asked. Tony asked me last week to cover how the Iron Dome works. So I went and did some research, and I found a very good story, an article about how this works. So, and it's pretty recent, actually. Because of its unique national security challenges, Israel has a long history of developing highly effective state-of-the-art defense technologies and capabilities. A prime example of Israeli military strength is the Iron Dome air defense system, which has been widely touted as the world's best defense against both missiles and rockets. However, on October 7, 2023, Israel was caught off guard by an incredibly large-scale missile attack by the Gaza-based Palestinian militant group Hamas. The group fired several thousand missiles at a number of targets across Israel, according to most reports. While exact details are not available, it is clear that a significant number of the Hamas missiles penetrated the Israeli defenses, inflicting extensive damage and massive casualties. The following comes from an aerospace engineer who studies space and defense systems. There is a simple reason the Israeli defense strategy was not fully effective against the Hamas attack. To understand why, you first need to understand the basics of air defense systems. Air defense: detect, decide, and disable. An air defense system consists of nearly 3 components. First, there are radars to detect, identify, and track incoming targets. The range of these radars vary. Iron Dome's radar is affected over distances of 2.5 to 43.5 miles. For those of you who don't use freedom units, that's 4 to 70 kilometers. According to its manufacturer, Raytheon, once an object has been detected by the radar, it must then be assessed to determine whether or not it's an actual threat. Information such as direction and speed are used to make this determination. If an object is confirmed as a threat, Iron Dome operators continue to track the object by radar. Missile speeds vary considerably, but assuming a representative speed of 3,280 feet per second, or 1 kilometer a second, the defense system has at most 1 minute only to respond to the attack. A diagram, which I've showed you here, showing the trajectory of a missile along with a radar system tracking the missile and a defensive missile intercepting the attacking missile. That's what you're seeing there on your screen. Top of the page. Israel's Iron Dome air defense system launches interceptor missiles to shoot down incoming missiles and rockets. Ilya Yefimovich, that's who provided this photo actually, came from the University of Colorado Boulder. That's where I got the story from, by the way. Fundamental elements of the missile defense system. That's what you're seeing there. The second major element of an air defense system is the Battle Control Center. This component determines the appropriate way to engage a confirmed threat. It uses the continually updating radar information to determine the optimal response in terms of from where to fire its interceptor missiles and how many to launch against an incoming missile. So it's economical. The third major component is the interceptor missile itself. For the Iron Dome, it is a supersonic missile with a heat-seeking sensor. These sensors provide in-flight updates to the interceptor, allowing it to steer towards and close in on a threat. The interceptor uses a proximity fuse activated by a small radar to explode close to the incoming missile so that it does not have to hit it directly to disable it. Where have you heard that before? ADCAT missiles used by the U.S. Navy. A torpedo almost never directly hits the target, it explodes near the target. It's been that way since the 40s. Limits of the missile defenses. Israel has at least 10 Iron Dome batteries in operation, each containing 80 interceptor missiles. So that's 800 missiles. Each of those missiles costs $60,000 US. In previous attacks involving smaller numbers of missiles and rockets, Iron Dome was 90% effective against a range of incoming threats. So, why was the system less effective against the recent Hamas attacks? Now, before I read this part, my theory is, think of the Uruk-hai against all the fucking defenders in Lord of the Rings. It's a sheer numbers game. It's lemmings. But let's read on. It is a simple question of numbers. Oh, I guess I was right. Hamas fired several thousand rockets, and Israel had less than 1,000 interceptors in the field ready to counter them. Even if the Iron Dome was 100% effective against the incoming threats, the sheer number of the missiles fired by Hamas meant that some were going to get through. The Hamas attacks illustrate very clearly that even the best air defense systems can be overwhelmed if they're overmatched by the number of threats they have to encounter. Well, no shit. So, how the Iron Dome actually works. The Israeli missile defense has been built up over many years, with high levels of financial investment. How could Hamas afford to overwhelm it? Again, it all comes down to sheer numbers. The missiles fired by Hamas cost less than $600 each, and so they are about 100 times less expensive than the Iron Dome interceptor missiles. The total cost to Israel for firing all of its interceptors is 48 million. If Hamas fired 5,000 missiles, the cost would only be 3 million. Thus, in a carefully planned and executed strategy, Hamas accumulated over time a large number of relatively inexpensive missiles and rockets that it knew would overwhelm the Iron Dome defensive capabilities. Unfortunately for Israel, the Hamas attack represents a very clear example of military asymmetry. A low-cost, less capable approach was able to defeat a more expensive, high-technology system. Where have we heard this before? Let me remind you of the Russian T-34 tank against the Tiger tank of Nazi Germany. They would send 7 T-34s against one Russian Tiger and destroy it. Numbers obliterate technology. Lemmings. Future air defense systems. The Hamas attack will have repercussions for all of the world's major military powers. It clearly illustrates the need for air defense systems that are much more effective in two important ways. First, there is the need for a much deeper arsenal of defensive weapons that can address very large numbers of missile threats. Second, the cost per defensive weapon needs to be reduced significantly. This episode is likely to accelerate the development and deployment of directed energy air defense systems based on high energy lasers and high power microwaves. That is known as the Iron Rod. If we do another episode, I will cover that for you. These devices are sometimes described as having an infinite magazine because they are relatively low cost per shot fired and can keep firing as long as they're supplied with electrical power. Good job, you idiots. You just told the enemy how to disable your new weapon, EMPs. You're retards. This is how you solve this problem. Pwnery's opinion. How do you stop a wave of incoming missiles when you only have a limited number of missiles? Let me remind you how the Navy deals with this. If a TASM missile, that is a tactical air launched, no, is it tactical anti-ship missile, TASM, is fired at a ship, if the ship can take out the missile with an anti-missile, it will. If it seems to defeat that missile, CWIS, close-in weapons support system, right? Uses radars, uses very quick reacting Vulcan miniguns, and lead storms the incoming round and literally obliterates it out of the sky. Just fire a wave of lead at a missile and break it apart, essentially, right? That's what CWIS is. Well, my other co-host, who's not here tonight, Scott, he told me that there is a land-based version of that. It's called CRAM. And that's how you solve the problem. For every launcher you have in Iron Dome, you have 20 or 30 CRAM on building rooftops with radar. And you simply just out of the sky. That's how you stop it. File that under duh. Unless you got a better idea. Because, if you're going to play laser tag with incoming missiles, that's great as long as you don't get EMP'd. I guess CWIS radar would still fall into the same vulnerability. But, you know what? I'll take my chances with CRAM, okay? It works on ship missiles. It could work on surface-to-ground missiles, surface-to-surface missiles. That's my opinion in theory. If you guys agree or disagree, leave a comment. Anyway, I've probably bored you all to death or put you in a coma. I'm going to turn that picture off. And I'm going to play, unless you have something you want to add, Mike.
No, we pretty much killed everything.
We have killed everything. It's been 2.5 hours. I'm going to play this. I'm going to thank you, the viewers, for watching. This was The War Room, Israeli Special Episode 3. And if you're new to my channel, welcome, and please hit subscribe. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlist and see if my other interests may be of interest to you. These episodes get longer because this war is getting longer. If I could make them shorter, I would, but we're trying to be thorough in the interests of your curiosity and my sanity. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for spending your evenings with us. Thank you, Mike, for attending. I can't say Slava Ukraini because this is Israeli's war.
Well, let's say it anyways.
Slava Ukraini, Slava
Slava
Israel,
shall not be infringed.
and good night.